Welcome back to my channel, Math and Language, and we're going to talk about capital structure ratio analysis under financial management. So we have seven problems here. So let's start with number one. Total liabilities amounted to 400,000 pesos and total equity amounted to 600,000 pesos. Debt ratio is blank, equity ratio is blank, debt to equity ratio is blank. So we are asked to find the debt ratio, yung equity ratio daw, pati yung debt to equity ratio. So let's check the formula first. Pag debt to equity ratio, total liabilities over total equity. Palatandaan natin, debt is liabilities, utang, equity. Yan, syempre equity din. Pag debt ratio naman, pag walang 2, yung TO, ang denominator mo palagi ay total assets. Same with equity ratio, ang denominator is total assets. At syempre, ang numerator, kung equity ratio yan, ang numerator mo ay equity. Pag debt ratio, liabilities siya. Okay? So, paano kaya ito? Number one, if the total liabilities amounted to 400,000, alam natin, yan, liabilities 400K. Tapos, ang total equity amounted to 600K. Alright, 600,000. Debt ratio is total liabilities over total assets. Wala tayong assets or total assets. Remember, sa accounting equation, ang asset is equal to liability plus equity. So, 400,000 plus 600,000, ang total assets natin will be 1 million. So, masasagutin na natin yung debt ratio. Debt ratio DR, that will be 400K over 1 million. So, um, lalabas dito is 0.4 or in percentage, that will be 40%. So, may sagot na tayo dito. Sa una, this is 40%. Paano naman sir pag equity ratio? So, ang equity natin is 600K. Saan natin siya i-divide? Ang denominator natin will be total assets. At alam natin, ang total assets ay 1 million. So, that will be equity ratio. That will be 600K. Divide mo ng 1 million, you will have 0.6 or 60%. So, yung equity ratio natin ay 60%. Okay? Pag debt to equity ratio, ang formula natin is total liabilities over total equity. So, mauuna muna yung debt, which is liability, at yung denominator natin, that will be equity. Total liabilities over total equity. Kapag sinabi naman, just in case lang, equity to debt ratio, pabaliktarin mo lang yung formula. Kung total liabilities over total equity to, magiging total equity, total EQ na lang over mo ng total liabilities. Okay? So, sagutin natin, debt to equity ratio, we have 400K. Divide mo ng 600K. So, lalabas dito mga, gamit na lang ako ng calcu. 400,000. So, 400 na lang. 600. Yan. Multiply mo ng 100 and you add the percent sign. That will be 66.67%. Two decimal places. Okay? Total liabilities, let's have number 2. So, iusog ko lang to para mas madali. Yan. Total liabilities amounted to 1.2 million and total equity amounted to 800,000. That ratio is, again, pag that ratio, liabilities, that ratio ay total liabilities at pag ratio lang, ang denominator natin or i-divide natin siya sa total assets. Check mo yung formula. Tama tayo, right? So we have, alam na ba natin ang total assets? Hindi pa. Paano kunin ang asset? That will be asset is equal to liabilities plus equity. And asset is equal to 1.2 M plus mo yung equity na 800K. And you have 2 million, right? 2 million yan. So, yung total debt ratio natin, total liabilities will be 1.2 M over mo ng 2 million. You get a calculator here. So, 1,200 na lang over 1,000. 0.6. You will still get the same answer. I'll show you. Dinivide ko sila pares ng 1,000. But I'll show you. 1, 2, divide mo ng 2,000,000, 0.6 pa rin, di ba? 0.6 or 60%. So that ratio natin sa number 2 is 60%. Paano naman yung equity ratio? Equity ratio natin, you have 800K here, 800K or 800,000 divided by 2M, and that will be around 800,000 divided by 2,000,000. Oh, sorry, 100,000 divided by 2,000,000, you have 0.4 or 40%, di ba? So 40% to. Paano ang debt to equity ratio? Anong formula ulit ng debt to equity ratio? That will be total liable. So, lalagay ko muna. Debt to equity ratio is equal to total liability is over total equity. Mhm. Okay. So, total liabilities natin, that will be 1.2M. Ngayon ko dito, 1.2M divided by total equity, which is around, ilan to? 800K. So, you gamit a calculator, and that will be around 1.5. Mm. This is the answer, and if you want to convert it to percentage, you just multiply it by 100, and that will be 150%. So yung debt to equity ratio natin is 1.5, or 1.5 is to 1, or you can say 150%. Mhm. Okay, next one. Let's have number 3. So iusog ko lang to. That ratio daw ay 60%. Okay, this will be an exception because the answers are already provided. Ito na yun eh. Yan. So we will skip this one. Let's go to number 4. Equity ratio is 25% and then debt ratio is blank while debt to equity ratio is blank. Paano kaya to, sir? Wala tayong total assets or anything. We only have percentage. Kung mapapansin nyo sa number 1 and 2, pag complementary sila. Pag itong debt ratio na to, inad mo sa equity ratio, they will equal 100%. 40% plus 60%, 100 sila palagi. Same with number 2. Ang debt ratio is 60%. At ang equity ratio natin is 40%. It will still arrive to 100%. Diba? So, paano yun? So, kung ang equity ratio natin dito ay 25%, ang equity ratio natin, ER is 25%. Anong idadagdag mo dito sa debt ratio para maging 100%? So that will be 100 minus 25. Ang sagot ay 75. So 75% ang debt ratio natin. Diba? Easy. Paano naman yung debt to equity ratio? So again, nauna si debt, so siya yung numerator. Ang debt ratio natin ay 75%. Over mo ng 25%. Okay. You might want to convert it kung hindi kaya ng calculator. So 75%, that will be 0.75. 25% is 0.25. And the answer will be, let's use a calculator. I'm gonna 0.25, and that will be 3, right? 3 is to 1, or 300%. Ang debt to equity ratio natin for number 4. Paano naman kapag number 5? This is a little bit weird. Okay? Debt to equity ratio is 80%, tapos inapahanap sa atin ng equity to debt ratio, babalik na rin mo. Paano yun? I'll show you an example. 80% to, di ba? Meron tayong total liabilities at total equity at ang lumabas daw ay 80% or 0.8. Mm. I'll give you an example. I'll just make uh, Sample lang. Total liabilities natin will be 400K. Total equity natin, that will be 500K. And alam ko magiging 0.8 yan. Divide mo ng 500,000. Yeah, 0.8, diba? Ito yung debt to equity ratio natin na 80%. Paano pag equity to debt ratio? Gagawin mo lang is, mapapakita ko sa inyo, babalik ta rin ko. Ang equity ng total equity, di ba? 500K. At ito naman, yung nasa baba, 400K. Ang lalabas dyan ay 500,000. Divide mo ng 400,000, 1.25. Di ba? Ang equity to debt ratio natin is 1.25 is to 1 or 125%, right? But there's an easier way para hindi ka na mag-invento pa ng mga example. Gawin mo, di ba debt to equity ratio, pag mabalik ka rin siya, kunin mo yung reciprocal. So, 1 over 80% or 1 over 0.8. Kuha ka ng calcu, and that will be 1.25. Diba? You just get the reciprocal. Hmm. How about number 6? We have the same scenario. Debt to equity ratio is 2/3. Equity to debt ratio is, you just make baliktad the number, I mean the fraction. So 2/3 to, di ba? 2/3, reciprocal niyan, baliktarin mo lang, 3 halves na. And 3 halves is 1.5. 1.5 or 150% or 1.5 is 2, 1, colon, 1. Ayusin ko lang kasi medyo magulo siya. 1.5 is to 1, right? Okay, to prove it, I'll just make something, debt to equity ratio. For example, ang debt natin is, I need that. Kailangan ko mapag-isip ng 2/3. Alright, we have 600K over 900K. So, 600,000 divided by 900,000, you will have, yan, 0.67, right? Or 2/3. 2/3 yan eh. Or 2/3 din yan. But, or 2/3. I'll show you. It's 2/3. 2 divided by 3, di ba? Ito yung that total liabilities, and this is the total equity. Paano kapag pabaliktarin mo siya? Ito yung nasa taas na, 900K, at yung 600K naman, ito dito. You will see, 900,000, that will be 1.5. Hmm, di ba? Unless I have the last one, I'll just copy this one. I just need some space. If the debt ratio is 40% and total equity amounted to 300,000 pesos, total liabilities amounted to blank. So debt ratio daw is 40%. Ano bang debt ratio? Hmm? Ano bang formula ng debt ratio ulit? So total liabilities, tingnan natin ulit para sure lang. Oh, here you go. Total liabilities over total assets. I'll just get this one. Yan. Total liabilities over total assets. Total equity amounted to 300,000 and total liabilities hinahanap natin. Mhm. Hindi natin alam kung magkano yung total assets. Kaso, alam natin na yung debt ratio pati equity ratio, pag inad mo yan, yung debt ratio, I'll just debt R, plus mo ng equity ratio, pag inad mo yan, 100%, di ba? So, kung debt ratio is 40%, alam natin ang equity ratio will be 60%, di ba? Kasi 100 yan. So, 60% na ang equity ratio. Okay? Kung ano bang formula ng equity ratio, nandito yan. Total equity is over total assets. Alam natin, ang equity amounted to 300,000, di ba? 300K. Tapos total assets. Tapos ang equity ratio natin is 60%, di ba? Paano mo mahanap ang total assets? Ito, gamitin mo ng cross-multiply mo to. It will be 300,000 divide mo ng 0.6. I just converted it. Okay? And that will be 500,000. So, ang total assets natin ay 500,000. Di ba? Kaso, yung yung tanong? No. Ang tanong kasi is total liabilities. Di ba? Kung alam natin ang assets is equal to liabilities, asset is equal to liability plus equity. Alam natin ang total asset ay 500k at ang equity natin ay saan yun? 300k, di ba? Ito yun, oh. 300k. Ano yung nalagay mo dito? Para nag-add ka ng 300k, lalabas 500k. Siyempre, 200k yan. Mm. So this is the asset, liability, and equity. Ito na yung sagot, 200k. And that's the end of the lesson about capital structure ratio analysis under financial management. If you have questions or in need of clarifications, please comment down. I'll see you again. Bye.